The screams pierced through the marble halls of the $40 million mansion at exactly 2:17 a.m., just like they had every single night for the past 8 months. 7-year-old Isabella Morrison's voice shattered the silence so violently that the crystal chandelier in the foyer seemed to tremble, and her father, billionaire tech mogul Marcus Morrison, pressed his palms against his ears as he sat alone in his study, surrounded by empty whiskey bottles and unfinished business contracts. Before we continue, if you enjoy stories about healing and human connection, make sure to click that subscribe button. This is the best way for you to support our work. Thank you very much, and let's continue. The 23rd nanny had quit that morning. Marcus stared at her resignation letter on his mahogany desk, the words blurring together as exhaustion weighed down his eyelids. I cannot continue to work in an environment where the child exhibits such severe behavioral disturbances, she had written in precise handwriting. The screaming episodes are beyond my professional capacity to manage. Marcus crumpled the letter and threw it toward the wastebasket, missing by several feet. He didn't bother to pick it up. The floor of his study was already littered with similar letters, each one a testament to his failure as a father. 23 highly qualified, extensively trained child care professionals had walked through the doors of Morrison Manor, and 23 had left, unable to cope with Isabella's nightly terror. The screaming continued upstairs, a raw, primal sound that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than a child's throat. Marcus had heard that exact sound before, 8 months ago, when his wife Catherine had taken her final breath in the hospital bed, her hand growing cold in his as the machines flatlined around them. That was when Isabella's screaming had started. The very first night they came home from the funeral, she had woken up shrieking, and she hadn't stopped since. Every night at 2:17 a.m. without fail, as if some internal alarm clock had been set to remind them both of the moment their world had shattered. Marcus pushed himself up from his leather chair, his legs unsteady beneath him. He was only 42, but felt decades older. His once sharp business suits hung loose on his frame, and his dark hair had begun showing streaks of premature gray. The man who had built a technology empire worth $8 billion couldn't figure out how to help his own daughter sleep through the night. He climbed the grand staircase, each step echoing through the cavernous mansion. The house was too big, too empty, too full of memories. Catherine had chosen every piece of furniture, every painting, every detail that made this place a home. Now it felt like a mausoleum, beautiful and cold and haunted by the ghost of happiness. Isabella's bedroom door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, Marcus could see her small form thrashing beneath silk sheets. Her long dark hair, so much like Catherine's, was plastered to her face with sweat and tears. Her eyes were wide open, but seeing nothing, lost in whatever nightmare had claimed her. "Bella," Marcus whispered, using the pet name Catherine had given her. "Daddy's here." But she couldn't hear him. She never could, not when the episodes took hold. Marcus had consulted the best child psychologists money could buy, had flown in specialists from around the world. They prescribed medications and therapies, but nothing touched the core of her pain. The next day, Marcus sat in his study, scrolling through another batch of nanny applications on his laptop. The requirements had become increasingly desperate. Experience with traumatized children, willingness to work nights, exceptional patience, and most importantly, the ability to function on very little sleep. The salary he was offering had tripled since the first nanny quit, but money couldn't buy what Isabella really needed. His assistant, Patricia, knocked on the door and entered with a steaming cup of coffee and a tablet. "Mr. Morrison, there's one more application that came in late yesterday. The agency thought you might want to see it." Marcus barely looked up. "What's her background?" "Ah, she's 28, graduated from Cambridge with a degree in child psychology and developmental therapy. She's worked with trauma cases before, specifically children who've lost parents. Her name is Evelyn Hayes. Send her the standard interview." "Packet," Marcus said, already turning back to his laptop. "Sir," Patricia said, hesitating. "She specifically requested to speak with you personally before taking the position. She says she has some questions about Isabella's case that she needs answered honestly." Marcus's fingers paused over the keyboard. In his experience, people only asked for honesty when they suspected you'd been lying. "What kind of questions?" She didn't specify, but she said she's worked with similar situations before and wants to understand the full scope of what she'd be dealing with. Something in Patricia's tone made Marcus look up. His assistant had been with him for 12 years, had helped him navigate hostile takeovers and federal investigations, and she rarely showed uncertainty. But there was something in her expression now, a kind of cautious hope that made him curious. "Fine," he said. "Schedule the call for this afternoon." At 3 o'clock, Marcus found himself on a video call with Evelyn Hayes and immediately understood why Patricia had seemed intrigued. The woman on his screen had striking green eyes and auburn hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, but it wasn't her appearance that caught his attention. It was the way she looked directly into the camera, unflinching and completely present in a way that reminded him uncomfortably of Catherine. "Mr. Morrison," she said, her voice carrying a slight British accent, "I want to be completely transparent. I've read Isabella's file, and I've worked with similar trauma patterns. What I need to know is whether you're ready to commit to the process of healing, or if you're just looking for someone to manage the symptoms. I'm not sure I understand the distinction. Managing symptoms means keeping Isabella quiet, medicated, and functional enough that she doesn't disrupt your life. Healing means being willing to face the grief that's driving her episodes, which means you'll have to face yours as well. Most parents in your situation prefer management." The bluntness of her words hit him like a physical blow. "You don't know anything about my situation. I know that your wife died 8 months ago from complications related to lupus. I know that Isabella was extremely close to her mother and that the screaming started the night of the funeral. I know you've been through 23 nannies. And I know that you've been working 16 to 18-hour days since Catherine passed." She paused, her expression softening slightly. "I also know that grief shared is grief divided, and grief hidden is grief multiplied." Marcus stared at her, feeling exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the video call. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I want to try something unconventional. Instead of focusing primarily on Isabella during the day and leaving you to handle the nights alone, I'd like to implement a comprehensive approach. I'll work with Isabella during the day, certainly, but I'd also like to be present during her episodes, and I'd like you to be present too. I've tried that. She doesn't respond to me when she's in that state. Because you're trying to fix the symptom instead of addressing the cause. Isabella's screaming isn't random, Mr. Morrison. It's communication. She's trying to tell you something, and until someone listens properly, she'll keep screaming. What makes you think you can succeed where 23 other professionals have failed?" "Because I'm not going to try to stop her from screaming," Evelyn said simply. "I'm going to help her find another way to say what she needs to say." Evelyn Hayes arrived at Morrison Manor the next morning, carrying a small suitcase and a worn leather messenger bag. Marcus watched from his study window as she stood in the circular driveway for a long moment, taking in the imposing facade of the house. Most new employees seemed dwarfed by the mansion's grandeur, but Evelyn simply nodded to herself, as if she were confirming something she already knew. When Patricia brought her to Marcus's study for orientation, they found Isabella curled up, in the reading chair by the window, staring out at the garden with vacant eyes. "Isabella," Marcus said gently, "this is Miss Hayes." Isabella turned her head slowly, studying Evelyn with the kind of intense scrutiny that only children possessed. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and Marcus felt the familiar anxiety that accompanied any new introduction. Isabella had barely acknowledged the last several nannies, treating them like furniture that occasionally made demands. But then, something unexpected happened. Evelyn didn't smile or offer cheerful greetings or try to immediately engage Isabella in conversation. Instead, she simply sat down on the floor near the chair, pulled a small notebook from her bag, and began writing. The scratching of her pen was the only sound in the room. Isabella watched her for several minutes before finally speaking. "What are you writing?" "I'm making a list of things I noticed on my way here," Evelyn said without looking up, "like how there are exactly 47 rose bushes in the front garden, and how the light coming through this window makes everything look like it's underwater." "Why?" "Because sometimes the things we notice tell us more about a place than the things we're supposed to see." Isabella considered this. "What else did you notice?" "I noticed that someone planted white roses next to pink ones, which is unusual, but whoever planned this garden wanted them to look like they were dancing together." For the first time in months, Marcus saw something flicker in Isabella's eyes. Interest, recognition. "Mama planted those," she said softly. "She said the white ones were for purity and the pink ones were for love, and together they made perfect love. She sounds like she was very wise," Evelyn said, finally looking up from her notebook. "And very beautiful, if the garden is anything to judge by." Isabella nodded solemnly. She was the most beautiful mama in the whole world. Marcus felt his throat tighten at the simple honesty in his daughter's voice. These were the most words Isabella had spoken at once since the funeral, and they were about Catherine. He had spent months trying to distract her from thoughts of her mother, thinking that remembering would only make the pain worse. But here was Evelyn, encouraging Isabella to talk about Catherine within minutes of meeting her. "Would you like to show me the garden later?" Evelyn asked. "I'd love to see the roses up close." Isabella nodded eagerly, and for a moment she looked almost like her old self. But then the light faded from her eyes again, and she turned back to the window. Mama can't see them anymore," she whispered. "No," Evelyn agreed quietly. "But you can see them for her. You can remember how much she loved them and how happy they made her. Sometimes that's the most important job in the world." Marcus found himself blinking back tears, overwhelmed by the simple perfection of Evelyn's response. Not false comfort or empty promises that everything would be okay, but acknowledgement of loss paired with purpose. It was exactly what he had been unable to give Isabella, paralyzed as he was by his own grief. That afternoon, Evelyn and Isabella spent 3 hours in the garden. Marcus watched from his study window as they moved slowly among the rose bushes, Evelyn listening intently as Isabella pointed out different varieties and shared stories about helping Catherine with the planting. For the first time since the funeral, Isabella was animated, using her hands to gesture as she spoke, her face bright with memory. But as evening approached, Marcus saw the familiar tension creeping back into his daughter's shoulders. Her movements became more restrained, her voice quieter, as if she were already preparing for the terror that awaited her in sleep. Dinner was a subdued affair, as it had been for months. Isabella picked at her food, while Marcus tried to make conversation about her day with Evelyn, but the shadow of approaching night hung over the dining room like a storm cloud, and by 8 o'clock, Isabella was practically vibrating with anxiety. "Don't want to go to sleep," she announced at dinner. "Can Miss Hayes read me a story?" Isabella asked with desperate hope. "Of course," Evelyn said. "What kind of story would you like?" "One about mamas who don't go away," Isabella said in a small voice. "That's a wonderful kind of story," Evelyn said gently, "because mamas never really go away. They just love us in different ways." Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "But I can't see her anymore. I can't hug her or tell her about my day." "No, you can't do those things," Evelyn agreed. "And that's the hardest part of missing someone. But love doesn't need hugs to be real." As they headed upstairs for bedtime, Marcus followed, something pulling him along, despite his usual habit of avoiding Isabella's room after dinner. He stood in the doorway as Evelyn helped Isabella into her pajamas and brushed her long, dark hair, movements gentle and practiced. "Miss Hayes," Isabella said as she climbed into bed, "will you stay when the screaming starts?" "Yes," Evelyn said without hesitation. "I'll be right here." "It's scary when it happens. I can't stop it." "I know, sweetheart, but you don't have to stop it. Sometimes we need to let the scared feelings out so they don't get stuck inside us." Marcus retreated to his study as usual, but found himself unable to concentrate on work. At 2:15 a.m., he crept upstairs and positioned himself outside Isabella's door, waiting for the inevitable. When the screaming started at exactly 2:17, he was surprised to hear Evelyn's voice underneath the sound, not trying to quiet Isabella, but simply talking to her in low, steady tones. "I'm here, Isabella. You're safe. The scary feelings can't hurt you." But tonight something was different. After about 10 minutes, Evelyn began to hum. It was a simple melody, hauntingly beautiful. The humming wove itself around Isabella's screams like a gentle embrace, not silencing them, but accompanying them, as if Evelyn were harmonizing with pain itself. Gradually, incredibly, Isabella's screams began to quiet, not the abrupt stop that usually came with exhaustion, but a slow diminishment, as if the melody was drawing the fear out of her body. And then he heard it. Beneath Evelyn's humming and his daughter's quieting cries, another sound joined the night. Symphony. It was coming from his own throat, a low moan of anguish that he hadn't even realized he was making. 8 months of suppressed grief poured out of him in that hallway, his body shaking with the force of emotions he had kept locked away. For the first time since Catherine's death, Marcus Morrison cried. The sound of his breakdown echoed through the hallway, raw and broken and 8 months overdue. He slid down the wall until he was sitting on the Persian runner, his expensive suit wrinkled and his face buried in his hands. All the control he had maintained, all the strength he had projected for Isabella and his employees and the world, crumbled away in that moment. Inside Isabella's room, the humming continued, but now it seemed to encompass more than just his daughter's pain. It was as if Evelyn somehow understood that the whole house was grieving, that trauma had infected every corner of this beautiful prison they called home. When Marcus finally lifted his head, he found Evelyn standing in the doorway, her green eyes reflecting a deep understanding that made him feel both exposed and oddly comforted. Isabella was curled up in her bed, breathing peacefully for the first time in months, her face relaxed in genuine sleep. "She's okay," Evelyn whispered, stepping into the hallway and closing the door softly behind her. "I don't understand what just happened," Marcus said, his voice hoarse from crying. Evelyn sat down beside him on the floor, her back against the wall, completely unbothered by the informality of their position. "Grief is like a song that gets stuck on repeat in your mind. Isabella's been singing the same note of pain every night, trying to get someone to hear the melody underneath. Tonight, I heard it." "What melody?" "She misses her mama. She's scared that if she stops screaming, if she stops hurting so much, it means she's forgetting Catherine. The pain is the only connection she has left." Marcus stared at her, recognition dawning like a slow sunrise. That's why nothing else worked. We're trying to take away the only thing that made her feel close to her mother. Exactly. And you've been doing the same thing, just silently. Working yourself into exhaustion so you don't have to feel how much you miss your wife. The accuracy of her observation should have made him defensive, but instead, Marcus felt something like relief. For months, well-meaning friends and colleagues had told him to move forward and think positive and focus on Isabella's future. No one had simply acknowledged that he was drowning in loss, that every day without Catherine felt like trying to breathe underwater. Over the following weeks, Evelyn implemented what she called intentional remembering. Instead of avoiding mentions of Catherine, she encouraged Isabella to share stories, look at photographs, and talk about her mother openly. They created a memory book together, filling it with pictures and Isabella's drawings. Most surprisingly, Evelyn insisted that Marcus be part of these sessions. As the three of them sat together sharing memories, something magical began to happen. Isabella started smiling when she talked about her mother. Real smiles, genuine joy at remembering happy times. Mama used to say that love was like seeds, Isabella said one afternoon, holding up a photograph of Catherine in the garden. She said that when you plant love in someone's heart, it keeps growing even when you can't see it anymore. Your mama was very wise, Evelyn said. Do you think she would want you to be sad forever? Isabella considered this seriously. No, Mama always wanted everyone to be happy. Then maybe the best way to honor her memory is to let yourself be happy again. Not all the time, because missing someone you love is normal, but some of the time when you remember how much joy she brought to your life. As spring turned into summer, the transformation in Isabella became more pronounced. She started talking about returning to school, began playing again with genuine joy. More remarkably, she started talking about her future in ways that included Catherine's memory. Marcus found himself changing too. He began leaving work earlier, drawn home by the sound of laughter that had returned to Morrison Manor. He started joining Isabella and Evelyn for their afternoon garden walks, discovering that talking about his wife brought comfort rather than pain. One evening in late June, as they sat on the terrace watching Isabella chase fireflies, Evelyn made an announcement that stopped Marcus's heart. I've been thinking about Isabella's progress, she said carefully, and I believe she's ready. To transition to a more traditional childcare arrangement. Her episodes have stopped entirely. My work here is essentially complete. Marcus felt panic rise in his throat. Over the past few months, Evelyn had become more than an employee. She had become a friend, a confidant, a source of wisdom and comfort. But Isabella still needs you, he said. Isabella needs stability and normalcy now, not intensive therapy. Marcus stared out at his daughter, who was spinning in circles with her arms outstretched, her face turned up to catch the last rays of sunlight. She looked like Catherine in that moment, alive and joyful. When? He asked quietly. I was thinking the end of July. That night, Marcus lay awake thinking about what life would look like after Evelyn left. He had grown accustomed to her quiet wisdom, her gentle humor. More than that, he realized he had begun to imagine a future that included her not as an employee, but as something more. The next morning, Marcus found Evelyn in the kitchen preparing Isabella's breakfast, humming softly as she worked. The domestic scene was so natural, so right, that it took his breath away. Evelyn, he said, stepping into the kitchen, I need to tell you something. She looked up from the pancake batter. What is it? I don't want you to leave because Isabella is healed. I want you to stay because I've fallen in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, brave and terrifying and completely honest. Evelyn set down her whisk and turned to face him fully. Marcus, I know it's complicated, but these past few months, watching you heal my daughter, watching you bring life back to this house, you've healed me too. I can't imagine going back to existing without you. What about Catherine? Evelyn asked gently. Catherine will always be part of me, Marcus said. But love doesn't diminish when it's shared. Catherine would want Isabella to be happy, and she would want me to be happy too. I think she would approve of you. Evelyn smiled then, the radiant expression that had first caught his attention. I've been hoping you would say something like that, because I've fallen in love with you too, with both of you. This family has become my home. Marcus crossed the kitchen and took her hands in his. So you'll stay? I'll stay, but not as the nanny anymore, as family. Isabella chose that moment to bound into the kitchen, still in her pajamas. She stopped short when she saw them holding hands. Are you going to marry Miss Hayes, Daddy? She asked with characteristic directness. Marcus and Evelyn looked at each other and laughed, the sound bright and hopeful. Would you like that, sweetheart? Marcus asked. Isabella considered this seriously. Will she still hum to me when I have bad dreams? Always, Evelyn promised. And will she help me remember Mama? Every day. Isabella nodded solemnly, then broke into the first truly carefree grin Marcus had seen from her since before Catherine's illness. Then yes, I think Mama would like that very much. 6 months later, on a crisp December morning, Marcus and Evelyn were married in the rose garden that Catherine had planted, with Isabella as their flower girl. The ceremony was small and simple, but it felt complete in a way that had everything to do with love. During the reception, as they danced under string lights, Marcus whispered in Evelyn's ear, "Thank you for teaching us that healing doesn't mean forgetting." "Thank you for showing me that love can bloom twice in the same garden," she whispered back. And as they swayed together in the cold December air, surrounded by the sleeping rose bushes that would bloom again in spring, they could hear Isabella's laughter echoing from the house, bright and clear and completely unafraid. The screaming had stopped permanently, replaced by the kind of joy that comes only after genuine healing. In the master bedroom of Morrison Manor, on the nightstand next to their bed, sat a framed photograph of Catherine holding newborn Isabella, both of them radiant with love. It was not a shrine to the past, but a bridge to the future, a reminder that some love stories have the courage to begin again,